A burnt-out car throws up a smokescreen.
Conflicting clues led us to believe that the offender may have committed multiple crimes.
The evidence pulls investigators in different directions.
But in the end, the offender's attempt to destroy evidence at the crime scene helped the police solve this case.
Clearwater, Florida, a picturesque community outside Tampa. Most people come for the sand and sun. But one night, a routine patrol finds something else. Police come across a car that looks abandoned. As they approach, signs of a recent fire are evident. Sergeant Andrews of the arson unit is called to investigate.
It was apparent that there was some burning inside of the car. Fire damage around and throughout the car. The windows were still heavily smoked on the inside. When I looked at the back seats, I saw what appeared to be 2 bottles. They looked like Molotov cocktails to me.
To Andrews, it's obvious this fire wasn't an accident.
They were definitely the source of the ignition, but the fire went out because the windows were uptight and it lacked oxygen. Since we had the Molotov cocktails inside the car, we decided that we needed to look in the trunk for further evidence.
The investigators aren't prepared for what they see next.
We found what appeared to be a white bedspread, and inside that bedspread was the body of a woman.
The victim has been bound and murdered. The arson case has morphed into a homicide. Sergeant Andrews sends the victim's body to the medical examiner for an autopsy. Lieutenant Jim Steffens, 17-year veteran of the Clearwater Police Department, takes over the investigation.
We quickly determined that the car that was registered to a lady in Dunedin matched the description of the body that we had. That body was identified as Ann Powell.
But who was Ann Powell, and why had she been killed? To answer that, Lieutenant Steffens pays a visit to Ann's apartment.
Things we were looking for are signs of forced entry. Did somebody break into her residence? We saw dishes still in the sink. We did not see anything indicating blood, nothing indicated a sign of a struggle.
One thing is clear, Ann didn't die at home.
How you doing? I'm Officer Cavalieri from Clearwater Police Department.
Officers interview Ann's neighbors, trying to learn more about the victim and her lifestyle.
She was estranged from her family. She was down here alone, and she was interested in dating men.
Police learn that Ann was a regular at a local bar, where they pick up their first real lead. A bartender remembers seeing Ann with one man in particular.
We found out that she had a steady male friend that we would characterize as a boyfriend, a gentleman named John Post.
John Post is a longtime resident of the Clearwater area and may have been one of the last people to see Ann Powell alive.
He was a significant person of interest for us at that point. We realized that time was of the essence.
Investigators are prepared for a showdown as they approach Post's house. But when the door opens, they get a surprise. They're confronted by an elderly man with a fused vertebra.
We saw that he actually had a physical ailment himself that limited his mobility, his ability to move in his upper torso and his neck. Looking at the evidence of the scene, the person that assaulted and killed Ann Powell had the ability to be physical.
John Post did not have the strength to lift Ann's body into the trunk. Lieutenant Steffens has no new leads, but he's got a resource that has yet to be tapped. Special Agent Dale Hinman, an expert criminal profiler.
When I first heard about this case, something didn't seem right. It sounded like a planned attack, but some of the elements just didn't fit.
Hinman's experience allows her to analyze both the evidence and the psychology behind a crime.
We thought the disposal of the body was the work of an amateur, and because of this, we thought Ann Powell was probably his first victim.
In Clearwater, Florida, Ann Powell's body has been found in the trunk of a burned-out car. Special Agent Dale Hinman joins the investigation. Agent Hinman wants to see where Ann Powell's body was found.
We get a lot of benefit from going to the place where the victim was discovered, especially in a very complicated case like this, one that involved both homicide and arson.
What we had is the crime scene here. When the arson detective got there to investigate, he peeled back the back seat, and there was a body wrapped in a comforter inside the trunk. The victim was tied up with ropes and bindings.
Tell me something about the victim.
Ann Powell did not have any immediate family located nearby. She liked to go to the bars and restaurants in the Pinellas County area, specifically along Clearwater Beach.
Well, it sounds like based on her lifestyle, she's placed in somewhat more of a high-risk category because she's somewhat more of a vulnerable person.
All the signs indicate that Ann Powell was a lonely woman interested in meeting men, and that might have contributed to her death.
What evidence did you find at this crime scene?
We had this car and nothing else. Whoever set the fire to the vehicle left the windows completely up in a sealed position, so the fire itself snuffed out.
Police suspect the fire was set to destroy evidence, but the fact that the job was bungled is itself a clue.
Sounds like the individual who set the fire was very criminally inexperienced to not know that the windows needed to be down for the fire to have a source of oxygen.
An amateur. But Agent Hinman can tell something else about this inexperienced offender. Dale is certain that binding and concealing the victim would have taken time, and this means there's another element to this crime.
This individual had an unlimited amount of time at another location to participate in all this activity. So after she's killed, she's placed in her car and moved to this location. We really have another crime scene that we need to be looking for.
And the medical examiner, Dr. Marie Hansen, might help reveal where.
It appears that she is an asphyxial death. She has some blunt trauma to the head, some bleeding between the scalp and the skull, multiple areas where she's been hit.
Dr. Hansen presents her findings to Lieutenant Steffens.
There's no soot in her airway, and testing of the blood shows that there's no carbon monoxide in her blood. So it looks like she was not breathing and inhaling at the time of the fire, which would be consistent with her being deceased before she was put in the car.
Dale examines the crime scene photos, looking for clues she might have missed.
When we took a closer look at the photos, it appeared that the knots were very complex, like he had spent a lot of time practicing. But when we looked at the vehicle, we noticed that whoever started this fire appeared to be very inexperienced, like he hadn't practiced starting fires at all. We started to consider the possibility that we had two different offenders.
Could two people have been involved in Ann Powell's death? If so, they may have struck again. Police get a call that another victim is found in the same lot as Ann Powell.
She was found without her clothing, so she was naked in the parking lot. With Ann being naked, even though she was wrapped in the comforter, we had to look at any similarities.
Special Agent Hinman agrees. She and Lieutenant Steffens meet Detective Dick Howard at the scene of the second murder. They want to know if these two crimes could be related.
Hi, Dick. How you doing?
Hi, Dale. I'm doing fine. Been a long time.
You. Tell me about this case.
Okay, at 8:30 in the morning, the body of a white female was discovered by a delivery person. She was identified as LaDonna Jane Steller.
LaDonna Steller's body is found just a few feet from where Ann Powell was discovered.
You know, with Ann Powell, we've got her in the trunk of her car just at the end of the lot over there.
Are there any similarities between this case and Ann Powell's murder?
Both bodies were recovered nude in a pretty public area. No clothing, no tags, no laundry marks, no anything like that.
But Detective Howard adds something else about the second victim.
It had been taped to the mouth, the wrist, and both ankles, which would indicate that prior to being brought here, there was some binding somewhere that weren't moved prior to leaving her here.
But even with bindings similar to those on Ann Powell, Agent Hinman isn't convinced the two crimes were committed by the same offender.
Even though there are a number of similarities in these cases, with Ann Powell's body being discovered in the trunk, bound and covered by the comforter, and the car set on fire, that makes this case very different.
Responding units process.
And there's still another difference. LaDonna Steller's body is found on the side of the road next to a possible clue.
What else was discovered here?
There were some tire tracks discovered just right here in the right-of-way of the roadway.
Tire tracks may be their most critical piece of evidence if they can identify the type of tire that made them.
This could be a very important lead because tire prints can be very unique, and perhaps this will lead us to a suspect.
Tire expert Ernie Ham joins the investigative team and makes casts of the tire impressions. Then he starts looking for a match. And the work pays off.
I was able to locate a Firestone ATX radial tire that has all the same design features that appear in the track.
Evidence technicians tell us that tire impressions and fingerprints are similar. They both have their own characteristics and their own patterns.
Police have their tire. Now they need to match it to a car and an owner. Fortunately, the tire isn't common.
The tires were SUV style or truck tires, and there was only one set that had been sold in the Pinellas County, Tampa Bay area. Huge break in the case.
Only one set of ATX tires sold. And who bought the tires? James Randall, a local window installer. Next, have police found the man responsible for two murders? Two women are dead, and police have a lead, James Randall. Randall's tire tracks could place him at the scene where LaDonna Steller's body was found. Investigators devise an ingenious plan to take possession of this critical piece of evidence.
Investigators brought the tire dealer in on the plan. The dealer offered Randall a free tire upgrade if he would trade in his old tires, but we didn't know if he would take the bait.
But Randall does. He agrees to the deal and exchanges his old tires for new ones. Investigators ship the tires to their expert, Ernie Ham. He makes an ink impression and discovers they're a match to the print left at the parking lot where LaDonna Steller and Ann Powell were found. James Randall's tires are now placed at the murder scenes. Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and Clearwater Police launch a manhunt to find him. After a 3-day search, sheriff's deputies manage to locate James Randall and arrest him. But do they have the right man for both murders? Dale Hinman still isn't convinced that James Randall killed Ann Powell.
While the crimes appear sexually motivated, I think the disposal of the body is more important. And Ann Powell was found in the trunk of the vehicle. She was bound, she was wrapped in a comforter, and there was a fire in the vehicle.
That fire is crucial to Hinman's profile.
It looks more like the individual is trying to destroy evidence and delay the identification of the body.
And this fact may set these crimes apart.
Because there was no bindings, no coverings, and no fire at the other scene, I think the cases are not related.
Agent Hinman thinks James Randall may have killed LaDonna Stellar, but not Ann Powell. And if the cases aren't related, Ann's killer is still at large, and police have no suspects. And then an unexpected phone call changes the course of the investigation.
Clearwater Police, Ray. My name is Dave Carpenter, and I did some work on that car. They found that person in the trunk of the car. Okay. I recognize the car because I'm the one that worked on it. And you're going to be there for a little while? Yeah. I'll have them give you a call. Thank you. Yep, bye.
Lieutenant Steffens immediately calls David Carpenter back. He may have valuable information about Ann's last days alive.
Not only had he done some work on the car, that he had been a handyman, that he had met our victim, Ann Powell, several days before.
When Carpenter is questioned, his story gets more intriguing.
In the same conversation on the phone, then he told me that he had had dinner with her, and then he told us that he had had sexual encounters with her.
But there's something about Carpenter's story that rings false to Lieutenant Steffens.
Sometimes criminals contact police to fish for information, to see if they can find out what the police know. Carpenter's call was very suspicious. It raised red flags for the investigators.
Lieutenant Steffens acts on that suspicion. He orders a search of David Carpenter's house.
When the police arrived at Carpenter's residence, they noticed ropes that had been tied into knots hanging from the tree in his front yard. These ropes were very similar to what was found on Ann Powell's body.
Next, does this quiet suburban house hold the key to Ann Powell's death? Ann Powell was murdered in Clearwater, Florida, and investigators have a suspect, David Carpenter. Ropes tied with distinctive knots found outside Carpenter's residence look like the bindings found on Powell's body. And inside the house, police find other troubling signs.
There was an area of carpet in the middle of the floor that had a distinct circle of discoloration. The investigators suspected it was spray paint.
But the spray paint appears to be covering up something more sinister.
The forensic specialist took a closer examination. There appeared to be blood.
Police test the stain, and it confirms their suspicions. The stain is blood, and it belongs to Ann Powell.
We now realize that this was the actual crime scene. This was where Ann Powell was killed.
David Carpenter is arrested for murder, and police discover he already has a criminal record for assault.
Rope and blood linked Carpenter to Ann Powell. He lured her to his residence, where he bound her and killed her. We thought whoever started the fire in her car was younger and less experienced than David Carpenter.
And that means another offender is still out there. Police lean on Carpenter for more information about the crime.
He told us about another individual named Neil Impaling. Neil Impaling attacked Ann Powell, which then led to her homicide.
Police learn that Neil Impaling has left the state, but it's not long before he's caught. And he tells a different story.
Impaling claimed that David Carpenter killed Ann Powell. He said his only role in this crime was to dispose of the body by burning the car.
Police have to sort out their stories and determine which man is telling the truth.
We all thought David Carpenter was the person who initiated the murder. He had a criminal history, he had experience in knot tying, and he lured Ann Powell to the crime scene. Neil Impaling was the amateur. He was youthful, he didn't have a criminal record, and he failed to destroy the evidence.
And the jury agrees. David Carpenter gets life in prison. Neil Impaling takes a plea bargain and gets 25 years. But what about LaDonna Stellar, the second victim? discovered in the same parking lot as Ann Powell. The man police suspected all along, James Randall, is convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It is so unusual to have two victims discovered at virtually the same scene. Through the skill and cooperation of the Clearwater Police and the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, they were able to separate these crimes and solve them both.